Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk about the latest issue of The Flash entitled Fear Me. So this episode picks up right where the previous episode left off, which was with the death of Abracadabra and the Flash encountering I don't even know what you'd call it, a hulking creature lady person thing that we don't, or at least didn't know the origin of. And at the beginning of this episode, Barry's trying to find the monster, which just kind of took off after confronting he and Kadabra and killing Kadabra, because obviously he wants to find out where it is and how to stop it from hurting anyone. But before that search gets very far, Barry is made aware that Frost and Caitlin are now separate people, bodily, meaning that the entity of Frost, which resided only in Caitlin's brain, is now a physical being that can stand beside Caitlin, which freaked him out and I guess freaked Iris out as well. And it was funny because Frost says, I told you they'd freak. Typical Frost. From there we go to a scene that takes place in Joe and Cecilia's home, where Cecilia is alone and apparently starts hallucinating. The hallucination isn't benign either. It's a scary entity that's kind of menacing her, and it was pretty frightening, and she kind of freaks out. But Joe shows up and breaks the hallucination, I guess, and says, hey, what's going on? You're okay, it's fine. You must have had a bad dream. She's like, no, it was real, I think. And they kind of sort of leave it there. Then we go back to the lab, and Caitlin is explaining, or someone is explaining, I guess, that when Mirror Monarch, who I just still want to call Mirror Mistress, blasted Frost with her mirror ray gun or whatever it is, it caused a split within Caitlin's mind, I guess, or something, and made it so that Frost would end up being a single entity to herself, bodily. So I wrote down a mirror blast split them. Nice. It makes some kind of sense because, you know, Caitlin, of course, and Frost are mirror images of each other physically, except for like hair color. And so that makes sense that they're being split into two separate entities, physical entities, happened as a result of a blast that's connected to like mirror technology. Of course, Caitlin starts talking pretty soon in the episode about we've got to get ourselves put back together. You know, she says to Caitlin, we've got to remerge. I want to get us back together. I'm like, why? No, don't do that. It's great having them as separate entities. Frost seems right away not to like this, though she doesn't say anything. Then there's a conversation about the scary entity lady, and Cisco gives her a name. I forgot what the name is. I'm going to try to put it up on the screen. And they go, what? And he goes, well, look, She-Hulk was taken. So that was pretty funny. And on top of that, it indicates that in the DC TV universe, the Marvel universe is a thing, which is weird. What we don't know is if Cisco is referring to a comic book character or a real person, which, I mean, either way, it's interesting, but in the DCT universe, is She-Hulk only a comic book character, or is she a real hero as well, like the Flash is a real hero? Very interesting. Shortly thereafter, some Speed Force lightning kind of crackles, and the Speed Force version of Barry's mother, Nora, sort of just drops out of the ceiling, and Barry has to catch her. Very strange. Not really sure why that happened. I'm not even sure they explained it by the end of the episode, but it was a weird moment. But before anything could be explained about that, we go to a scene in Joe's office where Iris is talking to him about some stuff. And this lady shows up and says she's from a state agency. And it seemed like Joe was expecting her, but not as early as that. And she says something about, oh, I like to get there early. I like to get places early. And he kind of begs off and says, I'm talking with my daughter. So she leaves. But I didn't like her presence. I didn't like the cut of her jib, as they say. She unnerved me. But more on that later. Back at the lab, Cisco is trying to repair the Firestorm Matrix, the chess piece matrix that enabled Victor and the other individual who makes up Firestorm, whose name I've forgotten, to in fact merge when they needed to become Firestorm. Of course, in the comic, they were always merged, but anyway, he's thinking that this device would allow him to merge Caitlin and Snow back together. Then there's a conversation between Frost and Cisco where she explains that she doesn't really want to be, back in Caitlin's head. And she doesn't understand why Caitlin would want her back in her head because, just for example, when Caitlin wants to watch the show This Is Us, Frost kind of nags her from inside her head, turn it off, turn it off. And Cisco's like, what? Why? I love that show. And she's like, oh, it's so weepy, which again is typical Frost. And I think it's funny that Cisco loves it. He kind of goes, how dare you say bad things about the greatest show ever? It was a pretty funny moment. Then we go to a scene where apparently the cops are under attack by some kind of monster. The Flash shows up to defeat the monster only to find out there's no monster, but the cops think there is. And it's because this villain that would seem is the one who earlier was menacing Cecile is making them see it. And he has a kind of a confrontation there and doesn't end up nabbing the guy. I think he's an interesting villain. They're calling him Psyche. And in the comic, Psyche is a character that wears purple, which is great because purple's my favorite color. And I guess invades the minds of his victims and gives them visions of their worst fear to sort of control them, which I thought was a very Scarecrow thing. And when this occurs, they have purple eyes. Their eyes turn purple, which is cool. But during the confrontation, the memories that he makes Barry see, I thought it was really like unfair, like a low blow, He shows him Reverse Flash menacing him, and he shows him Savitar like hurting him. Real bad, trauma that Barry experienced, and this Psyche guy was just bringing it back up, and I'm like, what a jerk. But then they confront him later wearing dampeners that were supposed to prevent him from being able to invade their minds, but he's so powerful that he busts right through them. He busts right past it and is still able to invade their minds. Barry runs really fast and gets some speed lightning going and throws it at him, but he absorbs it like it was nothing. And I'm thinking, how powerful is this guy? This could be bad. But this, whole thing causes Barry to once again find himself in a crisis of faith where he's like, I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I'm not powerful enough. All my friends are in danger. And I was like, he does this every week now. At least in previous seasons, it was once or twice a season, maybe only once. Now it's like every week he's having this crisis of faith. I didn't really like that. I wish they'd stop doing that. It cuts into his, credibility as a hero. Then we have a scene where it's pretty much just Caitlin and Frost talking to each other, and it was really weird. But they decide that they are going to try to live together as separate individuals. And I guess Caitlin says, well, what we can call this is we can just say, this is us, which I thought was cool because it goes back to the thing about the show. But they're going to be roomies, which is great. Then it turns out that Barry thinks the way to stop this Psyche person is to get Cecile to blast positive emotions or calming emotions across the whole city, because apparently the Psyche character is going to blast, fear energy all over the city, which again brought up Scarecrow stuff, because that's kind of like Scarecrow's gig where he wants to make the whole city afraid. He does it with a fear toxin, and Psyche seems to do it psychically. So same thing, different method of delivery. But in order to get this to occur, he thinks he has to put her in the chair that once belonged to the Thinker. And Cecile, of course, is dubious, but Barry says, no, it's fine. You can do this. You got to do this. So they set the chair up and they set about doing that. Once it's underway, it really starts to feel like the chair becomes kind of a Cerebro from, Marvel Comics with Cecile in it, because she's someone that can pick up on people's emotions. So she's like sensing people all over the city. and she's in communication with Barry, and it just gave me kind of like a Cerebro vibe. It was pretty cool. But before they can bring him down, there's another confrontation between he and Flash, where Flash is yet again shown, an image of stuff that would cause him fear or, deep sadness or self-doubt. And it's all his friends killed. And worst of all, he sees an essentially dead Iris reanimated, but not in a normal way. She starts moving around like an angry zombie, and it was pretty freaky. And Barry is understandably freaked out by this. I thought it was a cool moment because it just was really traumatic for him. And sometimes you want to see how your heroes deal with trauma, because when they beat it, it's a real nice sense of accomplishment, or you just feel good about the triumph. But it was freaky to see. Just for the record, again, Psyche's energy is purple and Cecile's energy was yellow. I don't know if that means anything, but we'll see. They were able to like completely delete Psyche. You see the energy wash over him and he just dissipates, kind of like the Marvel heroes at the end of Infinity War. It was pretty cool to see him just deleted. We don't know if he'll ever come back, but he's a scary guy and very powerful. So I would both welcome that because it would be cool, and I dread it because he's hard to beat, and it really puts the heroes through their paces. Everything seems fine after that, but then Barry gets kind of like a super headache, and he decides the only way he can save himself is to put himself in a coma so that the team can figure out what's wrong. So he goes and puts himself in a coma, which, I mean, that's not a good place where you want your hero to be. I was a little freaked out. Now we're going to have to wait and see how that goes next week. And it turns out that these creatures, I guess, both Psyche and the woman thing, are created by the Speed Force. Nora kind of stumbles out of one of the rooms of the lab where she'd been resting after she first arrived, and sort of talks about how they come from the Speed Force. I don't know how that makes any sense, and I don't know if it's something that it did in the comics, but, we're going to have to see more about that next week. This episode I didn't think was particularly great. It was fun to see the two Caitlins talking to each other and on screen at the same time. I enjoyed that. I liked the villain because I really like purple. And I think he was, proper scary, as the British would say, for a villain. And not all of these villains are. Not all of these villains put you on, your toes and on the edge of your seat saying, oh my God, how are they going to beat this guy? And this villain did that. And I like the villain of the week thing. I don't like these long arcs that they do with these big bads that, 2 and 3 times during the season, you think that they're going to beat them. But then, oh, no, they didn't. Why? Because it's a 22 episode season and they have to keep it going. But villain of the week is great. Confrontation, lose. Confrontation, lose. Confrontation, win. Done. That's what I prefer. So hopefully they'll do more of that, but we'll have to wait until next week to see what happens. That is the end of my review of this episode, so I'm going to take off. You should email me. I've put my email address up. You should subscribe to this channel. You should click the notification bell. You should leave a comment. You should leave a thumbs up and all of that good stuff. Help a YouTuber out. Until I return, I say peace and long life.